Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We're not going to do the Torah portion this morning. I can't. I can't. So the Torah portion is the Torah portion for Sukkot, because tonight is Yontif, which means Shabbat. Tomorrow morning is the first day of Sukkot. It is Chag. And on the Chag, there's a special Torah portion that's read. And the Torah portion that's read is the liturgical calendar. So we read this several times a year when we have Chag, right? So we read about the commandment for the to observe the holiday. But we read it and we read it and we read it and we read it and we read it. And usually I'm okay, but I can't. I just can't. So I can't. So we're going to do stuff around Sukkot. So we are going to study Torah. We are going to study Torah about Sukkot. We're also going to study a little bit of Mishnah. So I want to expose you to some of the texts in our tradition around Sukkot, rather than just read the calendar, which just is like, okay, it's 2 lines of Sukkot and the rest is the other holidays. All right. So here we go from Leviticus 23. Basukot teshvu shiv'at yamim. Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu basukot. You shall live in Sukkot 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in Sukkot, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. Ani Adonai Elohechem. I am Yud He Vav He, your God. What right away is a question? Right away there's a question. This is why we have a Mishnah on it right away. So what is the question? Basukot teshvu, y'all will live in Sukkot for 7 days. Everybody, every citizen of Israel will dwell in Sukkot. Why? What according to Leviticus, what's the reason for dwelling in Sukkot? Lama'an yed'u dorotechem, in order that your generations may know. Ki vasukot hoshavti et bnei Yisrael. I caused bnei Yisrael, the people of Israel, to dwell in Sukkot when I took them out of Eretz Mitzrayim. When? Do we have any record in Torah of them building Sukkot after coming out of Egypt? We do not. They dwelled in tents, right? Like, we don't have any record, any story of them building Sukkot in the desert. None. So this immediately raises a question for the rabbis, right? All right. So we're gonna hold that question. Around the time of Sukkot, as we said, there were prayers for rain. Hoshana Rabbah, there was water drawing, and there were prayers for rain. And apparently this was a very joyful, amazingly joyful festival. Here we have the end of Mishnah Sukkah, where it says, anyone who has never seen the rejoicing at the place of water drawing has never seen rejoicing in all his days. So this is the Mishnah talking about how incredibly celebratory the mood was on Sukkot, even as they had this anxiety, if you will, about water. All right, here's one of my favorites that you may not know. This is like truly one of my favorites. All right, this is from Mishnah Sukkah. From the worn out pants of the priests and from their worn out belts, they would tear pieces, and they would use them as wicks to light with them. And there was not a courtyard in Jerusalem that was not illuminated by the light of the place of water drawing. What pants do the priests wear? These are their underpants that they wear under their garment, so that when they go up the steps of the altar, remember we had this in Leviticus, so that we shouldn't see their nakedness. Their nakedness should not be exposed when they go up the steps, so they have to wear bloomers under their tunic. So the bloomers that were worn out got made into torches, and they were everywhere in the courtyard during Sukkot. All right, again from the Mishnah. Pious people and Men of great deeds, really. Anshe ma'aseh. So, big shots. So pious people and big shots would dance before them with lit torches in their hands and says before them words of song and praise. And the Levites would play with lutes and harps and cymbals and trumpets and countless musical instruments upon the 15 steps which descend into the women's court, people. The women were included in this party. Can you believe it? So the 15 steps that descend into the women's court corresponding with the 15 songs of ascent in the Psalms, that upon them the Levites would stand with their musical instruments and sing. And 2 priests would stand at the upper gate, which descends from the court of the Israelites to the women's court, with 2 trumpets in their hands. When the rooster first crowed, they would blow a tekiah and a truah and another tekiah. When they arrived at the 10th step, they would again blow a tekiah and a truah and a tekiah. When they arrived at the court, they would for a 3rd time blow a tekiah, a truah, and tekiah. They went on blowing and walking until they arrived at the gate that goes out to the east. When they arrived at the gate that goes out to the east, they turned their faces westward towards the temple. When is the temple ever in your west? And they said, our ancestors who were in this place, their backs were turned towards the temple of God and their faces eastwards, and they would bow eastward toward the sun. But our eyes are raised towards God. Rabbi Yehuda says they would repeat and say, we are for God and our eyes are towards God. So we associate tekiah, truah, tekiah, all these sounds of the shofar. What do we associate those sounds with? We associate it with Rosh Hashanah. But Rosh Hashanah is Yom Truah. We get no description, nothing, nada, zip, fs, bubkis, 0 about what that meant. Yom Truah, a day of Truah. We know nothing. We get a very detailed description in the Mishnah about the shofar blowing, the trumpets blowing, tekiah, truah, tekiah, on Sukkot. So imagine all these Levites out there. It's essentially an orchestra, right? Harps and cymbals and trumpets, and then they're going and they're playing the trumpet, and then and they have like all this music happening. So it was an incredibly big civic, which in Israelite tradition, there was no difference between civic and religious, right? It was a big civic and religious occurrence. So, I think of our 4th of July, right? We're just an amazing amount of everybody celebrating, the entire nation celebrating on this day. All right. So let's go back to our problem. Let's go back to our question. So what does it mean that God says, that Leviticus has God say, so that they may know that I made them to dwell in Sukkot when I took them out of Egypt? We don't get any Sukkot in our narratives about the desert. What do we get? The rabbis go there quickly, right? They need to do something because it doesn't make any sense. Ditanya, ki basukot hoshavti ipnei Yisrael, anane kavod, hayu divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer omer Sukkot mamash asu lahem. So there is an argument in the Mishnah about what does this mean that they were made to dwell in Sukkot in the desert. And Rabbi Eliezer says that these were ananei hakavod. These were the clouds that traveled with them. Remember, at night it was a pillar of fire, and during the day it was the pillars of cloud. That is what Rabbi Eliezer says God means when God says that I caused them to dwell in Sukkot. I sheltered them. I gave them a shelter when I took them out of Egypt. Rabbi Akiva argues, sorry, I read it as Eliezer the second time. Rabbi Akiva says, Sukkot mamash asu lehem. God made them mamash, for real, Sukkot. So Rabbi Akiva contends that we just don't have the story, but God is letting us know that God actually made Sukkot for them when they came out of Egypt. So this is a machloket. This is a argument in the Talmud. So now we're getting another piece of Mishnah here. So I referenced this in my talk, right? That everyone had to own their own lulav. Although they said that one cannot fulfill his obligation on the first day of the festival with the lulav belonging to his fellow, meaning you can't borrow it, you have to have one. He may nevertheless fulfill his obligation with the sukkah of his fellow. So you have to have your own lulav, but you can't borrow someone else's in order to fulfill the mitzvah. But the mitzvah of sukkah, of dwelling in the sukkah, you can use your neighbors. And they quote our verse from Leviticus 23, all that are homeborn in Israel shall dwell in Sukkot. This teaches that all of Israel are fit to sit in one sukkah. So, but I think the point here is, so you want people to have their own lulav. Like we said, it was a way of beautifying the mitzvah, that the courtyard was filled with lulavim, rather than just one that, you passed around to a bunch of people. So you have your own lulav, but it's okay to sit in to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah by sitting in someone else's sukkah. So I think, again, if we look at what might be the reasoning for that, I think it's that, the rabbis want people to sit in each other's sukkot, right? They want to encourage people going to someone else's sukkah and sitting in their sukkah. Let's go to Sefer HaToda'ah by Eliyahu Kitov, Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov. We are not making them the Sukkot in memory of the first set of clouds of glory that surrounded them when they first left Egypt, since these clouds of glory left them afterwards with the sin of the golden calf. Rather, we make them in memory of the clouds of glory that returned for them afterwards and never left them for all 40 years. I love this teaching. Why? Because it says, it's not God's first impulse to protect the Israelites that we're remembering. Those went away. Once they sinned at the golden calf, those clouds went away. They were gone, like out of here. And so which ones are we remembering? We're remembering the ones that were given to us after the sin of the calf, meaning and then stayed with us for 40 years. Which ones are we remembering? We're remembering the ones after we've been forgiven, right? Which is a beautiful teaching coming right on the heels of Yom Kippur. When Israel sinned with the calf, the clouds of glory left them. When Moses came down for the third time, he also brought the commandment of building the Mishkan as a sign that God had forgiven them. Comes the 15th day of Tishrei, what do they see? They see the clouds of glory that returned after leaving them from the sin of the calf until then. From then on, the people of Israel dwell in the shade of the clouds of glory that envelop them like a sukkah. What a beautiful teaching. That it's the clouds of glory that we were given after we messed up that stayed with us for 40 years. Just like the covenant that is in place today between the Jewish people and the divine, if we want to use that language of covenant, the covenant that's in place is not the first covenant. It's not Sinai. Sinai, that first time when God speaks and the people freak out and say, Moses, you go get it, right? That's not the covenant that's in place, because Moshe tore up that deal. Remember, he broke the tablets because they abrogated the deal. The people stepped out of the covenant, so he ripped up the document. Which covenant is in place? The covenant that remains in place to this day is when God says, "Salachti kidvarecha," I have forgiven you according to your words, to Moshe's request that the people be forgiven. That's the covenant that's in place. And these are the clouds of glory that we remember, the ones that we were given after we messed up and we were forgiven for being flawed human beings. All right. This is from Rabbi Alan Liu, Zichrono Livracha, from This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared. We sit flush with the world in a house that calls attention to the fact that it gives us no shelter. It is not really a house. It is the interrupted idea of a house, a parody of a house. So it is that the sukkah, with its broken lines, its open roof, its walls that don't quite surround us, calls the idea of the house to mind more forcefully than a house itself might do. And it exposes the idea of a house as an illusion. The idea of a house is that it gives us security, shelter, haven from the storm. But no house can really offer us this. No building of wood and stone can ever afford us protection from the disorder that is always lurking all around us. No shell we put between us and the world can ever really keep us secure from it. And we know this. We never really believed this illusion. That's why we never felt truly secure in it. In the Sukkah, a house that is open to the world, a house that freely acknowledges that it cannot be the basis of our security, we let go of this need. The illusion of protection falls away, and suddenly we are flush with our life, feeling our life, following our life, doing its dance one step after another. So we live in our homes and we buy into the illusion that that's going to keep us safe, but we're always acting out of knowing it's not true. We're always acting out of the fear of death. We're always acting out of the fear of getting sick. We're always acting out of the fear of losing it all. We act that way by getting more stuff. If I just collect more stuff and put it in my house, then I need a bigger house, and I'll get a bigger house and put more stuff in it. And then that's going to shield me from death and terrible things, right? That's how we act. So Rabbi Lou is saying, we have this illusion that our house is safe and it's going to keep us safe, but we actually act like we know that's not true. And so what is the remedy for that? It's at least once a year to move into something that screams it can't keep you safe, so that we sit for a while, for a week, with the awareness that we're never safe. And we know that. But when we can really get in touch with that, like for me, it's sitting in mindfulness practice every week with y'all, right? That when we settle down, stuff comes up. But if we can sit with it as a practice and be present to it and hold it and attend to it, that's how we become whole people, right? That's how we live lives of wholeness and goodness and honesty and spiritual maturity. So I love this from him. All right. Another passage from his book. This is a commandment we fulfill not with a gesture or a word, but with our entire body. This is only this and mikvah, by the way. Only sukkah and mikvah. These are the only two mitzvot that's not just an action. We use our entire body to be surrounded by something. That's the commandment. With mikvah, it's to have your body surrounded by water. And with sukkah, it's just leishev basukkah. You don't do anything. You just sit there. You're not commanded, you're right. You're just commanded leishev, to sit. So we do it with our entire body. We sit in the sukkah with our entire body. Only our entire body is capable of knowing what it felt like to leave the burden of Egyptian oppression behind, to let go of it. Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. The root of this word is tsar, a narrowness. So, right, the rabbis play with change the vowels, and it's not Mitzrayim, it's Meitzarim, from the narrow places. We left Meitzarim, from the narrows. Egypt was the narrow place. Only the entire body can know what it felt like to be pushed from a place of dire constriction and into a wilderness, a spacious, open world. Only the body can know what it felt like to be born. Only the body can know the fullness of joy, and this is a commandment that can only be fulfilled with joy. Remember, v'samachta b'chagecha, you shall rejoice in your festival, v'hayita ach sameach, and you will be only joyful, only happy. So we are commanded actually to be joyful in the sukkah. All right, let's look at this piece by Rabbi Akiva Weisinger. The sukkah is a temporary structure which we relate to as permanent. We are tashvu ke'en taduru. We sit in the sukkah in the manner in which we dwell in our permanent homes. And each Jew is commanded to oseh sukkato keva uveto arai, to eat, sleep, and sit in the sukkah in a manner of keva, permanence. So this is rabbinic. Rabbinic law takes, what does it mean, leishev basukah, to sit in the sukkah? It's not to sit, it's to dwell, right? Shave is dwell. So it's sit or dwell. It's the same root. So what do the rabbis say? What does that mean? How do we actually fulfill? What do we actually have to do to fulfill the commandment of leishev basukah, dwelling in the sukkah? And they say you have to do what you do in your house, in the sukkah. So to eat, sleep, and sit in the sukkah in a manner of keva, permanence, though the sukkah itself is arai, temporary. There is no attempt to deny the fact that this is a temporary structure. No demand to actually move into the sukkah, but to sit in it ke'en taduru, like the way you dwell. You are sitting in a temporary hut, fully cognizant of its temporary nature, but you are relating to it as if it is permanent. We are commanded to treat a temporary object with permanence. So this very notion of there is built into existence this, it's like an oxymoron. It's like, it's contradictory, but everything is temporary. Everything. Us, right? We're all temporary. But what does it mean then to treat something that we know is temporary as if it's permanent? So almost like as if it had the importance that we give something that we think of as permanent, when in fact, nothing is permanent. This is why we read Ecclesiastes on Sukkot. This is why we read Echa. Vanity, vanity. It is all vanity. As Micha Goodman says, so v'samachta b'chagecha ve'ayita ach sameach. You're supposed to only be happy. You're supposed to rejoice in your festival. So what's the text we're given to read? Ecclesiastes, the most depressing book in the Torah. Why is it depressing? Because it points out the fact that everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts. But that's really the secret of what makes things valuable, says Micha, is that they are impermanent. And that is what gives them their value. That's what gives our lives value, is the fact that we are mortal, the fact that we are finite. If we lived forever, we wouldn't treasure our days. We wouldn't treasure our experiences. We wouldn't treasure time with loved ones, because we could have it forever. The value is, in fact, that it is impermanent, and yet we give it the importance of something permanent in our lives and in our world. Is there something else? All right. So here is the commandment from Deuteronomy that I just quoted. So the commandment in Deuteronomy is the pilgrimage festival of Sukkot you are to observe for yourself for 7 days after the ingathering from your flesh threshing floor and from your fat. So when you gather in your stuff, right, that you taken, meaning from the threshing floor. So when you take in the harvest, you are to rejoice on your festival, right? V'samachta b'chagecha, verse Yud Daled. V'samachta b'chagecha, ata uvincha uvitecha ve'avadcha ve'amatecha. So who's supposed to rejoice? You, your son, your daughter, your servant, your female servant, the Levite, the ger, the orphan and the widow that are in your midst. So how's that going to happen, right? If a widow and an orphan, right, these people who are really vulnerable, like, so you have to make it so that they rejoice as well. And it's clear that it's not just about being an Israelite, because the ger is assumed not to be an Israelite. So it's not just about Israelites doing this. It's about everyone living in the land of Israel is to celebrate this Chag together. Everybody. All right. This is from the Zohar, an early book of Jewish mysticism. When people sit in a sukkah, the shade of faithfulness, the Shekhinah, which we know is the indwelling feminine, right? Divine. The Shekhinah spreads her wings over them. And Avraham, 5 other righteous ones, and Hamelech David, King David, make their dwelling with them. And so people should rejoice with shining countenance every day of the festival, together with these guests, which in the Zohar is called Ushpizin, who lodge with them. and we must gladden the poor, for the portion of the guests one invites comes from the enjoyment felt by the poor when they eat. All right, this is a very important custom, particularly in renewal circles, this custom of ushpizin. And people are encouraged to say who they want to invite into the sukkah that night as ushpizin, as guests, and why. So we're told Avraham, 5 other righteous ones, and Hamelech David, King David, are ushpizin in the sukkah. So there are 7. And Shekhinah spreads her wings over the sukkah, and that we are supposed to feed the poor, because like I asked before, how can they be celebrating Chag if they're hungry and vulnerable, right? So we are to feed the poor, which we tie to Purim, right? Sending mishloach manot, food to the poor on Purim, but for people to rejoice, they have to be given food, or else they can't rejoice. Most of rejoicing, right, is about eating and drinking. So I wanted you to know about this custom of ushpizin. It is very popular right now, very popular. I have mixed feelings about it, but that's neither here nor there. This is from Kohelet. This is from Ecclesiastes. All right, I'm going to read this. The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Love that. All right, I want to go to something from Be Happy and go to this text that is from Likutei Moharan. So this is Likutei Moharan. This is Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav. His students wrote down his teachings. He says, Mitzvah gedolah lihiyot b'simcha tamid. This is a very famous saying of Rabbi Nachman. Mitzvah gedolah. It is a big, ginormous mitzvah. Lihiyot b'simcha tamid. To enjoy tamid, always. Ulhit gaber leharchik ha'atzvut vehamara shchora bechol kocho, which involves lehit gaber, to gain strength over and to keep far away from one sorrows and bitterness. And hamara shchora, the dark, bitter stuff. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav was bipolar. So he knew very well what he was talking about when he talks about hamara shchora, the dark bitterness, the depression, right? He's talking about clinical, serious depression. And so he's commanding that he's saying it's a great mitzvah to enjoy tamid. Now we can read this always, right? Tamid as always, or tamid as we've read in Torah can also mean regularly. So to work regularly at being b'simcha and being in joy, and to work hard at overcoming and distancing from oneself all those things that we would associate with depression, bechol kocho, with all their might. All right, so I've given you a lot there to kind of hold.
Good stuff.
Richard's getting deep here. Love is temporary, but we need to act as if it is permanent. Lovely. Lovely. Anybody else got any reflections you want to share?
I like the idea that it's a mitzvah to be happy.
Yes. Yes, I do too. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a self-indulgence, that it's not a selfishness, but that it's a mitzvah, and to put it in traditional language, that God wants us to be happy and not unhappy. But I think the happiness here is not a trivial one, but a deep one that he's talking about. Maybe you want to reflect on, because too many times people just think that the pursuit of happiness is the end of life. But I don't think that's what this is saying.
Right, I agree. And like Emmelinda saying, joy, right, is a revolutionary thing, right? And that there's a Chinese proverb, only happy people can create a happy world. That's what he's talking. And he's talking about a joy that you have to work for, right? Lehit gaber, you have to be a gibor. You have to be a hero. You have to be Hercules. A gibor is a really strong hero. You have to be a gibor, lehit gaber, however you would turn that into a verb, right? You have to heroically work to keep the marash chora, that dark bitterness, away from you, to laharchik, to make it go rachok, to make it go far. And that's work. He is not someone who believes happiness just happens, right? He's somebody who believes you have to work really hard to be joyful and to keep at bay all of that darkness and bitterness and atzuvot and sadness. It's really, because it's easy for him. He went there a lot, right? And it was a lot of work to keep that at bay. And so he is the one he's from the Hasidic tradition that believes one of the ways that you have a rich spiritual life and relationship to God is before you start to daven, before you start to pray, you go outside, you go into nature, and you talk to God out loud for an hour. Out loud for an hour. And you don't censor and you don't think about what you're saying. You just talk to God. And so when we were doing the IJS, when I was doing the IJS 2-year program at one of our retreats, they said, okay, people, here's what we're going to do. Y'all are going to go outside. You're going to find your own, space, and you are going to talk out loud to God nonstop for 30 minutes. We'll ring the bell when it's time for you to come back in. And I thought, you have got to be kidding me. No way. I don't have 30 minutes to say to God. Thank you very much. Well,
that's what gardening does for you. Gardening does that for you.
Okay.
And why were there no women in that group singing?
Because it's not a mixed group.
Oh.
Right, Richard, and then Robin.
I was just riffing on what you were talking about, sort of the heroic nature of keeping things at bay. The image from the poem that you showed us from Rumi about greeting whatever comes, it still puts me in the mind of sort of like a first-person shooter game where instead of having all these aliens coming at you that you have to sort of blow away, it's all the bad stuff that's coming in that, getting them out of the way creates the space around you that you need to emanate out into the world to sort of to create the world that you want to live in.
Nice. That we have some choice about what thoughts we lean into and which ones we don't. That's the other thing. Is he's very disciplined about focusing our time and attention. What in the world? Be so happy that when others look at you, they are happy too. Right. So there was a text I was going to show you that talks exactly about that.
You're not going to tell us the end of your story?
I just love the picture, the little girl and the camel.
Right. So I know Robin wants to talk too. So I just want to read you, because it goes right with what Judith just showed us from Likutei Moharan. I didn't show you this text. It's on that sheet that I was looking at with you. On the topic of simcha, says Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, an analogy. Sometimes when people are happy and dance, they grab someone standing outside the circle who is depressed and gloomy. Against his will, they bring him into the circle of dancers. Against his will, they force him to be happy with them. It is the same with happiness. When a person is happy, gloom and suffering stand aside. Yet greater still is it to gather courage to actually pursue gloom and to introduce it into the joy, such that the gloom itself turns into joy. A person should transform gloom and all suffering into joy. It is like a person who comes to a celebration. The abundant joy and happiness then transforms all his worries, depression, and gloom into joy. We find that he has grabbed the gloom and introduced it against its will into the joy. That is the analogy. Right? So that's how the Rumi poem for me lines up with Rabbi Nachman saying, okay, you don't just distance yourself from them. How do you do that? How do you actually do that? You welcome them in. Right? Rumi is saying, meet them at the door with a cheerful smile. Maybe they're there to clear out some space for delight. And Nachman is saying the same thing. Take gloom and depression and whatever and pull it into the circle of dancing, joyful people, because it can't help then but become something else, right? When we introduce it into joy. Robin?
That's the long version of what I was trying to say. I was trying to say, work hard to be joyful and just dance for a few hours.
All right. So dancing, gardening, right? Some of these practices. Ed is saying you can't roller skate in a buffalo herd, but you can be happy if you what? You people, I never get tired of seeing what the heck. Okay. You can't roller skate in a buffalo herd, but you can be happy if you have a mind to, Roger Miller. Okay. Thank you for that wisdom from Roger Miller. So like practices are important. Things that are going to support being besimcha, being in joy. And like Bert said, it is actually a mitzvah according to Rabbi Nachman and his group of Hasidic people. That's a mitzvah. It is a serious mitzvah to pursue being joyful. And then our obligation is to yank other people from the edges into the middle of the dancing joyful people because it's the only, in other words, the only thing that's going to help is for us ourselves to get in touch with joy, right? That's what brings joy into the world. And that's what that song that I showed you was saying is someone who's besimcha me'ir et ha'olam, lights up the whole world.
It's contagious.
It's contagious. And that's how we meet the darkness, and how we dispel darkness is by light. Me'ir et ha'olam is to light up the world. Bubby?
I wanted to follow up on something you said earlier when you were talking about umishpazim. Yeah. And you said you had mixed feelings about it. And I was curious to see if you would expound upon that a little bit.
Yeah, you always nail me. She knows me really well. Yeah. I don't know. It's one of those mystical practices that I think I move in and out of being able to relate to. We did, I don't know if you remember, Bubby, but I did a Sukkot retreat in Duluth one year. I took a bunch of people on retreat for Sukkot. The dumbest idea I ever had was right after Yom Kippur, I have an idea. Let me take a bunch of people away and program for them for 2 days. Dumbest thing I ever did. But so I needed 2 days worth of teaching, right? And experiences. So we did Ushpizin, actually. We each went around and talked about who would we invite into the Sukkah and why. Who did we want to invite in? And it was really powerful. People cried. People, remembered people who were gone and why they would want them there and what they miss or, what they taught them. And it was really touching on some level. On another level, I don't know. I feel really weird about it.
Okay, fair enough.
It's weird. Yeah, my chavruta partner, I said, I don't want to do the Torah portion. I can't. You can't make me. And my chavruta partner said, so do something else with them. Fine. She goes, how about, do ushpizin? And I'll make, ushpizin.
But they like it.
No, I don't know what it is. Laura Diamond, speak.
I was just thinking it's, this week in my writing group, we came up with the prompt. We just sort of randomly figure out what we feel like writing about in that moment. And we chose when I feel despair, I sort of fill in the blank. And where I went to was ultimately dancing and, a night alone dancing in my living room because I missed it so much. So it's kind of nice to hear this tie-in to the teaching.
I think Robin and Laura need to start a KI Zoom dance practice.
I'm there.
Susan's there. All right, Laura. I think we need to arrange a dance party.
All right, and you can turn your cameras off.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably the only
thing. Turn your cameras off.
No witnesses are permitted.
And know that you're dancing together.
Right.
Dance group's a wonderful idea.
Right?
Absolutely.
But it's funny, look how many people responded right away, right, to this idea of moving the body through space as a deep connection to joy, right, as an immediate connection to joy.
Yes.
And
Amen.
It's so human, to move. And I'm reading this book called Together by the former, it was Obama's health, what's the Surgeon General. And he wrote a book called Together, talking about loneliness in America as epidemic. Like, it's reached epidemic proportions and it's killing more people, right, than heart disease and all this other stuff. And so one of the things he talks about is that there is a loneliness that is alleviated, like, just by together moving through space to music. And it's why every single human culture known to have existed has rituals, some kind of dance built into their culture, because there is something kinesthetically, like, when we connect, moving our bodies through space with other people, it is deeply alleviating of loneliness. Without speaking, without talking to each other, without sharing our stories, it's just dancing together does something for the human mind, soul, body chemistry, everything that really alleviates loneliness. So it's funny that so many of you responded, like, boom. Mostly women, though. I don't see David Russo jumping up to have a dance party. I do not see him doing that. Richard Rajay is dancing inside. Yeah. Isn't he the guy who has Latka Judaism? Dancing inside. All right. Well, I want to close with. Where did I put it? I'm not going to screen share because it's too complicated. Oh, yes, here it is. Looking for schach. So when one is building a sukkah, one needs schach. One needs the covering that goes on top of the sukkah, and it cannot be solid. You have to be able to see the stars. For the sukkah to be kosher, you have to be able to see the stars. You have to be able to see nature around you, or it's not a kosher sukkah. So schach, you have to find schach. Like when it's time to do the ki tiki bar that passes for a sukkah. When it's time to do that, we have to send our guys out, our custodians out, to find schach. They have to go find, where are they cutting trees? Where are they cutting branches so we can get enough schach to cover that thing? All right. So Rabbi Barbara Penzner years ago wrote this, and it still remains one of my favorite things for Sukkot. When driving around looking for schach to cover the sukkah, I realized some important lessons about looking for important things in life. Of course, it is possible to save oneself a lot of trouble and buy ready-made schach, but often the most fruitful search comes from the devotion one puts into it. Here are 10 basic steps to follow when looking for schach. Number 1, know what you're looking for. Once you have figured out what it is you want, it will be easier to find. When you don't know what you are seeking, the search will be much more difficult. The universe tends to respond to a clear request. Number 2, don't forget to look in your own backyard. What you want may not be as far away as you think. Number 3, bring an extra pair of eyes along if possible. It never hurts to ask for help, especially when you're looking for something important. Often, others can see with clearer eyes and less distraction than you can. Number 4, Be willing to spend time and travel along circuitous routes. Schach will not simply appear on main roads or jump out to greet you. The pursuit of anything worthwhile takes time. Number 5, trust your instincts. You may have to do something that counters the conventional wisdom. Deviations from a plan may offer unsuspected and surprising results. Number 6, keep your eyes on the road, even while you are actively looking for schach. While the search is important, so is driving the car. Driving carefully comes first, and while getting lost may help find what you are seeking, you also need to be able to return home. 7, don't stop short in traffic. If something seems enough to stop for it, it is worth going around the block to have a second look. Remember, other people around you are also looking, and your actions affect them as well. Number 8, don't take anything that belongs to someone else. It may be tempting to snip some branches off the evergreen tree that hangs over the road, but don't do it. Respect other people's property, even if you might think they're willing to part with it. When in doubt, ask. Number 9, be ready to get your clothes and car dirty and to lift heavy branches. If you need something, you must be willing to make the necessary sacrifices for it. And number 10, rejoice when your search has been successful. Anything that took a lot of effort to attain is worth celebrating. You can express gratitude in a multiple of ways, including thanking all of those who helped, giving tzedakah, arranging a celebration, or simply saying bracha.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.